the Gulf Coast experienced a terrible tragedy from the hurricanes Katrina and Rita. At that time, you were Allstate's vice president for corporate relations, and you manned the front line. Of course, there were many accusations in the following years about the integrity of the good hands of Allstate. And you found yourself dealing with the question of the flood versus the wind damage and over 300,000 claims. How did you, as an individual and as a corporation, handle extreme devastation and high emotions with little or no technology to support the normal communication that you would have with your employees and your various constituencies? How did you manage that?
Yeah.
It's remarkable.
Well, it might be. So let me break the question down into some individual parts. Firstly, let's talk about crisis management, right? I think the really important, the one most important thing about crisis management is to understand that a crisis is not normal operations. A crisis is different, and everybody in the organization has to behave on the basis that a crisis is different, and what you do, what you would normally do on a day-to-day basis, you have to put to one side and focus on the crisis. Because if you don't stay ahead of the crisis, it's going to overtake you. That was particularly the case with Katrina and Rita. And any time a calamity, a catastrophe like that happens, but in any organization, a crisis can happen anytime and come from anywhere. And your organization has to be ready to deal with it. It's really critical. And when it happens, you need to be able to put your game plan into operation and really focus on dealing with that crisis and staying ahead of the game. Just to repeat, if you don't stay ahead of it, it's going to stay ahead of you, and then you're going to be following it, and it's going to be taking you to places you don't really want to go to. The only way to manage a crisis, to get it to where you want it to be, is to really focus, keep everything really simple, clear, and do everything that you need to do in order to be able to stay ahead of the game. Insurance companies are really good, big insurance companies like Allstate and State Farm, are really good at dealing with what we would call a catastrophe. So in the Allstate case, we have a whole group of people who do nothing else but look after catastrophes when they happen. Anytime there's a tornado, an earthquake, a hurricane, even something like an ice storm which will take power out and destroy cars, or a flood, we have the specialized group that will go in to look after our customers first. So we've had lots of experience at dealing with catastrophes, both from a point of view of running an insurance business, claims, handling claims, and communications. And so to an extent, when Katrina came along, we pretty much had a game plan that we knew was tried and tested, that we were ready to put into operation. Indeed, before Katrina arrived on shore, we had 30 mobile claims facilities standing by, waiting. It was a little unclear exactly where it was going to come. Was it going to come in through New Orleans, or was it going to veer a little bit to the east? So we were waiting, ready to bring this facility in, and the local region had communications all ready to go. Katrina was really interesting because it was so much different from virtually any other catastrophe of the kind. And to your point about early on, true, communications went completely out. An interesting learning for me was, it just shows you the fragility of our communication system, right? All the cell phone towers go because the wind blows them down. And if the wind doesn't blow them down, there are so many people trying to get out on their cell phones, you can't get a line. So there are there's no wireless communication. And there probably wouldn't be in an earthquake as well. Next time the earthquake hits California, a big one, there won't be any wireless because all the towers are going to crumble. The regular landlines were fine for the first 24, 48, 72 hours. There was no power, but they all have backup generators, so they all moved to backup generators. But pretty quickly, after about the third or fourth day, those generators ran out of gas, and there was no way to get extra gas to them. So essentially, in that area, there was no communication happening. So our claims trucks, once we could actually get them in, which was really difficult, particularly with the security issues, were okay because they have their own facilities. But just to get our agents back up and running, we went and found a mobile telephone exchange and trucked it in, and we set it up in order to get people back up and running. But we have these systems already set up for when any hurricane comes through. We have these mobile claims officers come in, set up, and away we go, looking after customers. That's our number one priority. How do we first priority is how do we look after employees and agents, then how do we look after customers? And everybody's pretty much focused on that and nothing else but that for the first few weeks in the case of Katrina. And the role that communications plays is getting information to people. This is where you go to file your claim. Here are the locations. Here's what you could do. We use the news media to communicate to customers so that we can do what we're required to do and what we want to do in looking after our customers. And everybody in the Allstate family and in other insurance companies like Allstate, it's full of people who by their very nature are caring people. That's why you go work for an insurance company in most cases. You know, you're that way inclined. We are good neighbors if you work for State Farm, or we are, you know, that you're in good hands means something to the Allstate family. So that's we're focused on that. After a while, the communication system came back up, and the role of communications began to change. Because, to your point, we handled a lot of claims. And the insurance industry handled a lot of claims and paid out billions and billions of dollars. There was a very small percentage of all of those claims that became problematic. And it's an interesting conundrum for people like an insurance company where essentially you're bound by a legal document. Although we don't think of it this way, the policy that you have is a legal document between you and the insurance company. And the insurance company is bound by its requirement to deliver against that legal contract. And in the case of an insurance company like an Allstate or a State Farm, most of the other big insurance companies, people like that, we will bend over backwards to meet the terms of the contract. But sometimes you do get into a disagreement about, is what just happened covered under this contract or not? And that certainly did happen in the case of a relatively small number of homeowners in the region. And it's a really complicated, it is something covered, you know, under a normal homeowner's policy, you're not covered for water damage from the sort of event like a Katrina. You are covered if a tree falls down, breaks your roof, and rain gets in, you're covered. But if there's a flood, unless you've bought a special flood insurance policy from the government, you're not covered. Mm-hmm. And there was absolutely some debate, a lot of debate about that. Typically, not unusually, there's a lot of news coverage about the people who have the disagreement with the insurance company, and not much news coverage about the hundreds of thousands of people who've been very happy with the way that their claim was settled. And it is complicated trying to explain the legalities of an insurance contract when people's homes have disappeared, right? And they have, you know, the emotional consequences are very real, and insurance companies really sympathize. But unfortunately, they are bound by the legal contract, and so it becomes an issue. How do you deal with that? I think you have to be persistent, and you have to try and explain in terms that really make sense for the average individual, what's at stake and why things happen the way they do. And you know, some of these you're going to lose, I guess, and some of them you're going to win. At the end of the day, what we know is we'll be judged by how well our agents and our claims folks relate to the customers over time. And Allstate does a fabulous job with that, fabulous job.